The family tree. The process of evolution produces a pattern of relationships between species.
I think what they meant is patterns of perceived relationships between species, when limitlessly extrapolated into the past, create our belief in the unobservable process of evolution. But if they spent a lot of time being that accurate, they wouldn't have much of a story anymore.
By studying inherited species characteristics and other historical evidence, we can reconstruct evolutionary relationships and represent them on a family tree, called a phylogeny.
Let me read between the lines a little. Reconstruct means invent. This is another way of saying we don't observe this happening, thus making it not observational science, but we can use our imaginations and lead ourselves to believe that it did happen, and maybe, just maybe, it's sort of happening still. Does anyone else suspect that when they said evolution is science, they meant it is Scientology?
This tree, like all phylogenetic trees, is a hypothesis about the relationships among organisms.
Allow me to define a term. Hypothesis. A guess. In this case, a guess based on the presumption that evolution happened in the distant, unobservable past. Remember that as we go along. I'm not saying that it's only my opinion that this phylogenetic tree is mere invention. They have just told you that it is. This is not a record of observation, but a fabrication which they believe tells a true story. Not to put too fine a point on it, but this is an admission of faith in something unseen. The tire, the outer ring where real animals live, is really no different than the classification system made by Carl Linnaeus in the 1700s, except that this one begins with the belief that evolution is the cause of all life on Earth, whereas Carl believed God made everything.
The tree is supported by many lines of evidence, but it is probably not flawless.
Bask in the warming glow of the humility it takes to admit that their guesswork is probably not flawless. Let me say again, we observe the relationship between certain species of the same kind, most varieties of dogs for instance, but this is a far cry from having evidence that dogs and cabbages have a common ancestor. We've been grouping the different living things for centuries, but then Darwin came along and said,
"Hey, let's connect all of the dots until it forms a picture."
This is where the hub and the spokes came from. After connecting dots for 150 years, the picture is still really hard to read, as will be made evident by the next amazing piece of data, which is released like a flock of doves into the night sky.
For example, evidence discovered in the last 50 years suggests that birds are dinosaurs, which required adjustment to several vertebrate twigs.
Yes, they think birds are dinosaurs. Make note that this doesn't read, descended with modification from dinosaurs. Chickens? They are dinosaurs. Yeah, much like the International Space Station is a thatched roof cottage. And when they say evidence discovered in the last 50 years, they mean to say dedication to evolutionary dogma. I'll explain the flimsy nature of their evidence later. Seriously, go watch Jurassic Park. Then, look at a pigeon. This theory makes SpongeBob look like Isaac Newton.